She was the youngest on the range with no patch, no reputation, just a borrowed Barrett .50 and a clipboard full of win data. The veteran snipers barely acknowledged her. One laughed. That record's older than she is. But she took position, adjusted calmly, one shot, direct hit, 3,540 meters. No one cheered. They just checked the logbook and froze when her name printed beside the new record. She handed the rifle back without a word and walked away. From which city in the world are you watching this video today? If this story resonates with you, consider subscribing for more tales of unrecognized heroes. The morning fog clung to Fort Blackwood's advanced marksmanship training facility as Wren Tannhauser made her way across the range. Unlike the others with their customized gear and unit patches, she carried only a weathered clipboard filled with meticulously organized win data charts. Her auburn hair was tucked beneath a plain cap, her BDUs lacking any insignia or decoration. At the back of the morning briefing, she felt the stares without acknowledging them. Master Sergeant Kozlov, face lined with scars earned in conflicts most of the younger shooters had only read about, outlined the parameters for their upcoming extraction mission. This operation requires precision beyond standard parameters, Kozlov explained. His voice graveled from years of shouting over gunfire. We'll need covering fire from positions previously considered beyond effective range. Lieutenant Ambrose, with his Olympic shooting background and technical perfectionism, studied the topographical maps with intense focus. Beside him, Specialist Drake leaned back in his chair with the casual confidence of someone who'd seen his name in record books. Only our most experienced shooters will be considered for the primary position, Kozlov concluded, his eyes sweeping past Wren without pause. When personnel assignments were distributed, Wren received exactly what she expected: observation duty. She would record atmospheric conditions while the real shooters practiced. As she gathered her papers, Drake's voice carried deliberately across the room. "Weather girl thinks she's a shooter," he remarked to appreciative laughter. Wren's fingers tightened almost imperceptibly around her clipboard. She allowed herself one deep breath, eyes briefly closing before her expression returned to neutral. No reaction. Never a reaction. Throughout the morning, she moved between observation points, documenting wind speed, direction, humidity, and a dozen other variables that could affect a bullet's trajectory. She watched as even the veterans struggled with the day's difficult conditions. When Ambrose missed his third consecutive shot at the 2,800-meter target, Wren made a notation. Seeing her write, he scowled. "Something to share with the class?" he challenged. "The wind at your position reads differently than at the target," she said quietly. "There's a cross-current at the mid-range marker." Ambrose turned away without acknowledgement, but adjusted his next shot using almost exactly the correction she would have suggested. He hit the target, but said nothing. By midday, frustration permeated the range. Even Drake, whose 3,400-meter record shot had earned him near-legendary status, couldn't maintain consistency at extreme distances. The conditions were deemed impossible for record attempts, though no one would admit defeat so directly. Wren continued her silent work, invisible except when someone needed the latest atmospheric readings, but those who might have noticed would have seen her eyes not on her clipboard, but studying each shooter's technique, mentally making the adjustments they missed, calculating the shots they couldn't complete. The afternoon wind picked up as clouds gathered over the distant mountains. Wren recorded the barometric pressure drop, calculating how it would affect long-range trajectories. The veterans huddled near the equipment shed, voices low but tense as they discussed the upcoming mission. 3,000 meters minimum, Ambrose was saying, in mountain terrain with unpredictable wind patterns. "The general wants certainty," Kozlov replied. "One shot, one kill, from a position that gives our extraction team maximum coverage." Drake shook his head. "Even in perfect conditions, that's pushing the envelope." None of them noticed Wren within earshot, methodically checking her instruments. Her mind calculated distances, angles, and variables automatically, the way her father had taught her. 3,000 meters was difficult, but entirely possible with the right approach. She'd done it countless times on her own, far from military ranges where questions might be asked about civilian access to such distances. Lunch break came, and the shooters gathered in the mess tent. Wren sat alone, notebook open beside her tray, making additional calculations based on the morning's observations. She was so absorbed that she didn't notice Lieutenant Ambrose approach until his tray clattered down opposite hers. "Your correction earlier," he said without preamble. "How did you spot that cross-current?" Wren looked up, momentarily surprised by the direct address. "The secondary wind flags showed counter-rotation compared to the primary markers," she answered. "It creates a spiral effect at approximately 1,500 meters downrange." Ambrose studied her with narrowed eyes. "How long have you been with this unit?" 3 weeks, sir." "And before that?" "Various postings, mostly observation and data collection." He seemed about to ask more when Drake's voice boomed across the tent. "Ambrose, don't tell me you're taking shooting advice from the clipboard carrier." Ambrose's expression closed immediately. He stood, leaving his half-eaten meal. "Just checking her data," he said, before rejoining the veteran's table. Wren returned to her notebook, unbothered. She was used to being dismissed, had counted on it for her plan. Anonymity was protection. Invisibility was power. Her father had taught her that too, in those final months before they came for him. The afternoon session began with equipment checks and range recalibration. Kozlov assigned positions, once again placing Wren at the observation post furthest from the action. As she walked away, she overheard Drake joking with the others. "Bet she's never even fired anything bigger than a service pistol. If only they knew, but they would soon enough." At her observation post, Wren meticulously recorded conditions as shots rang out across the range. The veterans were struggling even more in the afternoon conditions. Wind gusts caused unpredictable shifts, and the barometric pressure continued to drop as the storm system approached from the mountains. Wren watched Specialist Drake attempt his record distance of 3,400 meters 6 times in succession. 6 misses. His frustration was visible even from her distant position. After his final attempt, he slammed his hand against the shooting platform rail. Kozlov called a break, and the shooters gathered for a strategy session. From her post, Wren could see their animated discussion, the tension in their body language. The mission loomed closer, and they were no closer to confidence at the required distances. She checked her watch. The day's session would end soon. It was now or never. Packing her instruments carefully, Wren made her way back to the main range where the veterans were already storing equipment. Kozlov was reviewing the day's data with evident disappointment. "Sir," she said, approaching him directly, "I'd like to take a practice shot." Conversation halted. All eyes turned toward her. Kozlov regarded her with surprise that quickly shifted to skepticism. "You ever fired a Barrett .50, kid?" "Not this model, sir," she answered truthfully. Nearby, Drake laughed. "You heard her, Kaz. Let the clipboard jockey have a go." Ambrose, more curious than mocking, retrieved his rifle. "Knock yourself out," he said, handing it to her. "Just don't break anything." The remaining shooters gathered to watch, expecting brief entertainment before dinner. Wren ignored them as she methodically prepared her position, arranging her shooting mat in a configuration they hadn't seen before. "That's not regulation," someone muttered. She checked the wind using a unique hand technique, then settled into a stance that was slightly unconventional but remarkably stable. Her breathing pattern slowed visibly, controlled in a way that even Ambrose noted with reluctant respect. Drake leaned against a post, smirking. "That record's older than she is." As Wren prepared for her shot, fragmented memories flickered through her mind. A younger version of herself, watching someone demonstrate the proper shooting stance. A tattered photograph of a military unit she'd memorized every face from. A newspaper headline, partially visible in a drawer she wasn't supposed to open. "Record disputed after mission." She pushed the memories away, focusing only on the present. The feel of the rifle, the calculations in her head, the minute adjustments for variables most shooters would never consider. One measured breath, gentle pressure on the trigger. The rifle's report echoed across the range. Silence fell as they waited for target confirmation. Seconds stretched into a full minute before the radio crackled to life. "Direct hit, center mass." The range officer's voice held disbelief. "Distance 3,540 meters. Confirm." The veterans exchanged looks of shock. Kozlov grabbed binoculars while Ambrose pulled up the digital targeting system. The impossible had happened on a day when their best shooters couldn't maintain consistency at far shorter distances. Confirmed, Ambrose finally said, his voice barely above a whisper. That's 140 meters beyond the current record. Drake pushed forward, demanding verification. Lucky shot. Has to be. Check the logbook, Kozlov ordered, his expression unreadable. As Ambrose input the data, the system requested the shooter's full name for the record. Wren's voice was steady as she stated, Tannhauser, Wren E. The effect was immediate. Kozlov's head snapped up, recognition flashing across his weathered features. Any relation to Ezra Tannhauser? Wren said nothing as she carefully handed the rifle back to Ambrose. Then simply, he was my father. The revelation hit the unit like a physical force. Ezra Ghost Tannhauser had been a legend whose long-range shooting record stood unchallenged for decades until his sudden disappearance after a classified operation went catastrophically wrong. His techniques were no longer taught, his name rarely mentioned. Your ghost daughter, Drake whispered, using the call sign that had once been spoken with reverence. Wren didn't acknowledge him. She simply collected her clipboard and walked off the range, leaving stunned silence in her wake. Wren didn't look back as she walked away from the range, maintaining her measured pace until she was certain she was out of sight. Only then did she allow her shoulders to relax slightly, her breath coming in a long, controlled exhale. The hard part was done. The name was out there now, spoken aloud in a place where it had been deliberately forgotten. In her temporary quarters, she sat on the edge of her bunk and opened her laptop. The screen illuminated with classified documents she had spent years obtaining through channels that would get her court-martialed if discovered. Operation Longshot, the mission that had destroyed her father's reputation and ultimately his life. She knew every detail by heart, had reconstructed the scenario in her mind countless times. Her father hadn't missed the shot. He had refused to take it. A knock at her door startled her. She quickly closed the laptop, sliding it under her pillow before opening the door. Lieutenant Ambrose stood there, his expression unreadable. Sergeant Kozlov wants to see you, he said, eyes lingering on her face as if searching for familiar features. Command center, now. Wren nodded, betraying nothing. This was expected, part of the plan even. She had never intended the revelation to be the end, only the beginning. The command center was housed in a reinforced concrete building at the center of the facility. Inside, Master Sergeant Kozlov waited alone, a thick file folder open on the desk before him. He didn't look up as she entered. Specialist Tannhauser, he said, emphasizing her true name. Or should I say Specialist Lowell, as your enlistment paperwork states. Either is accurate, sir, she answered. Lowell is my mother's maiden name. Using false credentials to enlist is punishable under military code. I didn't falsify any credentials, sir. I legally changed my name after my father's death. Kozlov finally looked up, his scarred face impossible to read. And your purpose in joining this unit under an assumed identity? Wren met his gaze directly. To restore the truth, sir. For a long moment, Kozlov said nothing. Then he turned the file toward her. Inside were photographs, reports, and a death certificate. Ezra Tannhauser, decorated sniper, died in military custody while awaiting court-martial. The official report says suicide, Kozlov said, his voice carefully neutral. Did you believe that? Never, Wren answered without hesitation. My father would never take his own life. He was murdered because he knew too much about what really happened. Kozlov leaned back, studying her with new intensity. You were, 16 when he died? 15, sir. And in the 8 years since, you've dedicated yourself to clearing his name? How? His techniques were classified? His methods removed from training? Wren's expression remained impassive. He taught me everything before they took him away. I've practiced every day since on private land, with equipment I built myself, based on his specifications. To break his record. To prove he was right, she corrected. The mission that ruined him, Operation Longshot, required an impossible shot. 3,000 meters, mountain terrain, unpredictable wind patterns. Similar to our current mission parameters, Kozlov observed. Exactly the same, Wren confirmed. It's why I'm here now. When I heard this unit was preparing for an extraction mission requiring long-distance cover, I knew this was my chance. Kozlov closed the file, his weathered hands resting atop it. Your father was a good man, one of the best shooters I ever served with. But his record was disputed, his methods questioned. The official report states he missed a critical shot that cost lives. He didn't miss, Ren said, a controlled intensity entering her voice for the first time. He refused to take it. There were civilians in the target zone, not listed in the brief. He reported it, but was overruled. When the operation went forward anyway, 16 civilians died in the extraction. They blamed him, said if he had taken the shot as ordered, our forces would have had proper cover. Kozlov's expression shifted subtly. That's a serious accusation, Specialist. It's the truth, sir. I have documentation. A long silence stretched between them. Outside, the range had gone quiet as darkness fell. Finally, Kozlov spoke. Your shot today. 3,540 meters, verified and recorded. He tapped the file. That's 140 meters beyond your father's disputed record. No one has come close to either mark in over a decade. The shot wasn't difficult, Ren said quietly. Not with proper calculation and technique. Every shooter on this range disagrees with you, Specialist. They were taught the wrong methods, sir. After my father's disgrace, his innovations were discarded. The military returned to conventional techniques that don't account for all variables. Kozlov stood, walking to a wall safe behind his desk. He entered a combination and removed an older, more weathered file. This one bore classified stamps and security warnings. Operation Longshot, he said, placing it on the desk. I was there. Did you know that? Not on the shooting team, but as part of the extraction force. I saw the aftermath. Ren hadn't known this. Her research had turned up the operation details, but not a complete personnel list. Then you saw what happened to those civilians. I saw a mission that went wrong in every possible way, Kozlov confirmed. The official report blamed your father's refusal to provide covering fire at the critical moment. Said his hesitation cost us the element of surprise. And you believed that? Kozlov's eyes met hers. I believed what I was ordered to believe, Specialist. Until today. He opened the classified file, revealing photographs and reports that had never been included in the official investigation. Aerial reconnaissance showing the civilian compound that wasn't in the mission brief. Communication logs with timestamps that contradicted the official timeline. And most damning, orders signed by a general, now 3 stars, explicitly denying Ezra Tannhauser's request to abort the mission due to civilian presence. Your father was right, Kozlov said, his voice heavy with the weight of long-buried truth. But sometimes being right gets you killed in this business. Ren stared at the evidence, emotions threatening to break through her carefully maintained composure. For 8 years, she had known this truth, but could never prove it. Now, seeing it confirmed in official documents made her hands tremble slightly. Who else knows? She asked. About this file? No one alive but me now. I've kept it secure, waiting. Waiting for what? I didn't know, until today. Kozlov studied her with new respect. Until I saw you make that shot. The shot that proves your father's methods work. The shot that validates everything he claimed was possible. A knock at the door interrupted them. Kozlov quickly returned the classified file to the safe before calling entry. Lieutenant Ambrose entered, followed by Specialist Drake. Both men looked uncomfortable, shifting their gaze between Kozlov and Ren. Sir, Ambrose began formally. The team has reviewed Specialist Tannhauser's shot data. It's legitimate. All verification protocols confirm the distance and accuracy. Drake stepped forward, uncharacteristically subdued. We've also reviewed the historical records, her father's techniques, the ones that were dismissed after his, disgrace. They match what we observed in her approach today. And your conclusion? Kozlov prompted. Ambrose straightened. The Tannhauser method works, sir. We've been training with outdated techniques that limit our effective range. Which means, Kozlov pressed. Which means, Drake said reluctantly, that if Ezra Tannhauser claimed he could make the shot required for Operation Longshot, he probably could have. And if he refused, it wasn't because of inability. Wren kept her expression neutral, but inside, a weight she had carried for 8 years began to lift. This was more than she had dared hope for. Vindication from the very community that had rejected her father's innovations. "Thank you, gentlemen," Kozlov said. "That will be all for now." After they left, Kozlov turned back to Wren. "Tomorrow's mission briefing is at 0600. I expect you to be there, Specialist Tannhauser." "Sir?" she questioned, uncertain of his meaning. "We need the best shooter available for this mission. Today, you prove that's you." He paused. "Unless you've accomplished what you came for and plan to disappear now that you've made your point." The question hung in the air between them. Wren had indeed planned to leave once she'd broken the record and forced them to acknowledge her father's name. Her personal mission was accomplished. But something had shifted when she saw those classified documents, when she realized Kozlov had been protecting the truth all these years. "I'll be there, sir," she said finally. 0600. Kozlov nodded, a ghost of a smile crossing his features. "Get some rest, Specialist. Tomorrow, you'll have a real rifle assigned to you, not a borrowed one." As she turned to leave, he added, "Your father would be proud, Wren. Not just of the shot, but of your persistence in seeking the truth." Outside, the night air had turned cold as Wren made her way back to her quarters. The lights of the range were dim in the distance, but she could make out figures still moving about, likely discussing the day's extraordinary events. Her name, her real name, would be circulating now. By morning, everyone would know who she was and why she had come. The secrecy was over. Now came the harder part, the part her father had warned would be most difficult. Now that she had their attention, now that she had proven her skill beyond question, she had to use that leverage to force a reckoning with the past. Tomorrow's mission was just the beginning. The shot that would truly matter wasn't one measured in meters, but in the impact it would have on the truth her father died protecting. Dawn arrived with thin light filtering through the mountain mist as Wren made her way to the briefing room. She had slept little, her mind cycling through the revelations of the previous day and the implications for the mission ahead. She had come to Fort Blackwood seeking justice for her father, but now found herself thrust into a position of responsibility she hadn't anticipated. The room fell silent as she entered. Eyes followed her movement to an empty seat near the back, but Kozlov gestured her forward. "Specialist Tannhauser will be taking primary position for today's operation," he announced without preamble. "Lieutenant Ambrose will provide secondary coverage." The silence deepened. Drake, who had expected the primary shooter role, stiffened but said nothing. The others exchanged glances, their surprise evident but their discipline holding. Kozlov activated the tactical display, revealing satellite imagery of a mountainous region. "Extraction Point Alpha is located here, in this valley. Our team needs covering fire from this ridge, approximately 3,200 meters from the extraction zone." "Weather conditions?" Wren asked, studying the topography. "Variable. Mountain terrain creates unpredictable wind patterns, barometric pressure dropping, possibility of light precipitation." Kozlov's eyes met hers. "Similar to the conditions you handled yesterday." "And the mission parameters?" she pressed. "Standard extraction protocol. Our team will retrieve the package at 1500 hours. They'll need clean entry and exit routes, which means neutralizing any hostile presence in these 3 positions." He indicated points on the map that formed a triangle around the extraction zone. Wren nodded, making mental calculations. "I'll need elevated position with clear sightlines to all 3 targets." "Already plotted," Ambrose said, stepping forward to adjust the display. "This outcropping gives you the necessary elevation and concealment." As the briefing continued, Wren absorbed the details with practiced focus. This wasn't just a mission now, it was a test. Not of her shooting skills, those she had already proven, but of her father's methods under actual field conditions. The methods that had been discredited and abandoned after his disgrace. When the briefing concluded, the team dispersed to prepare their equipment. Wren found herself approached by Drake, his usual cockiness subdued. "Tannhauser," he said, using her real name for the first time. "I owe you an apology." She regarded him neutrally, waiting. "I said things," he continued awkwardly, "about your father, about you. I was wrong." "You believed what you were told to believe," she said, echoing Kozlov's words from the night before. Still, he extended his hand. Good luck out there today. She accepted the handshake, noting the genuine respect that had replaced the condescension in his eyes. It wasn't why she had come, this validation from peers, but she found it unexpectedly meaningful. At the armory, Wren was issued a brand new Barrett .50 caliber rifle, customized with the latest modifications. She inspected it thoroughly, making small adjustments to suit her preferences. The weapon was familiar in her hands despite its differences from the older models she had trained on. The principles remained the same. Ambrose joined her at the testing range, where she sighted in the new rifle with methodical precision. Your technique, he observed as she completed another perfect grouping at 1,000 meters. It's not standard procedure. No, she agreed. My father developed these methods after studying thousands of long-range shots. He found that conventional wisdom ignored certain variables that become critical beyond 2,000 meters. Like the Earth's rotation, Ambrose noted. I saw how you adjusted for it yesterday. And atmospheric stratification, she added. Different air layers move at different speeds. Most shooters account for wind at their position and maybe at the target, but not the variations between. Ambrose absorbed this with the focus of a true technician. These methods were classified after your father's situation. They were suppressed, Wren corrected. Buried, not because they didn't work, but because acknowledging their effectiveness would mean acknowledging he was right about other things too. Before Ambrose could respond, Kozlov approached. Transports leave in 20 minutes. Finish your preparations. The helicopters carried them deep into the mountain range, depositing the sniper team at a camouflaged landing zone 5 kilometers from their final position. From there, they traveled on foot, moving silently through dense forest that gradually gave way to rocky terrain as they ascended. The shooting position was exactly as the briefing had indicated, a natural outcropping that provided both concealment and clear sightlines to the valley below. Wren set up her equipment with Ambrose as her spotter, while the rest of the team established security perimeter. Wind is shifting, Ambrose reported, checking his instruments, barometric pressure continuing to drop. Wren adjusted her calculations, marking the updates in her data book. Her mind was clear, focused on the task at hand. Yet, part of her couldn't help seeing the parallels to her father's final mission. The same difficult conditions, the same impossible distances, the same critical need for precision. Extraction team reports ready for insertion. Kozlov's voice came through their communications. Stand by for final authorization. As they waited, Ambrose studied her through his binoculars. You didn't just come here to break a record, did you? No, Wren admitted. I came here because I knew this mission was coming. Same parameters as Operation Longshot. Same impossible requirements. How could you have known? She met his gaze briefly. I've spent 8 years tracking every operation that matched my father's final mission profile. When I saw this one being prepared, with this unit, I knew it was time. Time for what? Before she could answer, their communications crackled again. All units, mission is green. Repeat, mission is green. Extraction team inserting now. Through her scope, Wren watched as the extraction team moved into position at the valley floor. Their movements were precise, disciplined, invisible to anyone without the advantage of her elevated position and high-powered optics. Then she saw what they couldn't. Movement in the tree line near the first target position. Not the expected hostile forces, but civilians. A small group, perhaps 5 or 6 people, moving cautiously through the area. Ambrose, she said quietly. Northeast quadrant, grid reference 045. Confirm what I'm seeing. He adjusted his spotting scope. Confirmed, civilians present, not on the brief. The parallels were no longer subtle. This was history repeating itself with uncanny precision. The same tragic scenario that had destroyed her father was unfolding again before her eyes. Command, this is Overwatch, she radioed, using their mission call sign. We have civilians in the target zone. Repeat, civilians present at target position 1. A tense silence followed. Then, Overwatch, this is Command. Intelligence shows no civilian presence in that sector. Proceed with the mission as briefed. Wren exchanged glances with Ambrose, seeing the understanding dawn in his eyes. This was exactly what had happened to her father. Command, respectfully, I have visual confirmation of at least 6 civilians at the target coordinates. Request mission delay until they clear the area. Another pause, longer this time. Overwatch, negative on delay. Extraction team is committed. Neutralize the targets as briefed. That's an order. The moment of truth had arrived, sooner than she had expected, but exactly as she had feared. Ren calculated the shot, her mind automatically adjusting for all variables. It was within her capabilities, a clean shot with high probability of success. But the civilians would be caught in the aftermath, just as they had been 8 years ago. Her finger rested lightly on the trigger as her father's voice echoed in her memory. The hardest shot isn't the one at the longest distance. It's the one where you have to decide whether to pull the trigger at all. Overwatch, confirm you copy last transmission. Command pressed. Ren took a deep breath. Command, this is Overwatch. I am declining the shot due to civilian presence, requesting alternative approach. The radio exploded with angry response, but Ren had already lowered her rifle. Beside her, Ambrose looked pale but resolute. You understand what you're doing? He asked quietly. I'm doing exactly what my father did, she answered. The right thing. They'll court-martial you. Probably, she agreed, unless we can prove the civilians are there and were deliberately omitted from the brief. Ambrose considered this, then began adjusting his camera equipment. I'll document everything, get clear evidence of their presence. Command to all units, the radio crackled again. Mission abort. Repeat, mission abort. Extraction team, return to insertion point immediately. Ren and Ambrose exchanged surprised glances. This wasn't how it had gone for her father. His mission had proceeded despite his objections, with tragic results. All units return to base, the transmission continued. Overwatch, report directly to command center upon arrival. The return journey passed in tense silence. Ren expected to be met by military police, to be arrested for disobeying a direct order. Instead, they found Kozlov waiting alone at the landing zone. Sir, she began formally, I take full responsibility for my actions. Save it, specialist, he interrupted. Your civilian sighting was correct. Satellite confirmation came through 5 minutes after your report. They weren't supposed to be there, but they were. Relief washed over her, followed quickly by suspicion. Just like 8 years ago. Kozlov nodded grimly. Exactly like then, only this time we have corroborating evidence. This time, the mission was aborted instead of proceeding. This time, no civilians died. Because of you, Ambrose added. Because you made the same call your father did. The difference, Kozlov said, is that today, your call was heeded. Your father's was ignored, and then he was blamed for the consequences. Back at Fort Blackwood, a different atmosphere greeted them. Word had spread about the mission abort, about Ren's refusal to take the shot, and about the subsequent confirmation of her civilian sighting. The veterans who had mocked her now regarded her with a new respect, tinged with something like awe. In Kozlov's office, the classified files from Operation Longshot were laid open beside the reports from their aborted mission. The parallels were undeniable, the pattern clear to anyone willing to see it. We're reopening the investigation into your father's case, Kozlov informed her. With today's events as corroborating evidence, we can prove he made the right call, that he was set up to take the fall for someone else's mistake. Ren stood at rigid attention, her composure finally cracking as the implications sank in. 8 years of dedication, of silent preparation, of single-minded focus on clearing her father's name had culminated in this moment. General Hayward has approved a formal review, Kozlov continued. The same General Hayward who signed off on proceeding with Operation Longshot against your father's objections. He's suddenly very interested in setting the record straight now that similar circumstances have been documented. Politics, Ambrose observed dryly. Nobody wants to be on the wrong side of history twice. Or the wrong side of a congressional inquiry, Kozlov agreed. Either way, Specialist Tannhauser, your father's name will be cleared. His methods will be reinstated in the training protocols, and his record will stand alongside yours in the logbooks. The next morning, the unit assembled in formal uniform at the memorial wall where the names of fallen marksmen were inscribed. Notable achievements and records were listed on a separate plaque, a plaque that had once included Ezra Tannhauser's name before it was removed. The veteran stood at attention as Kozlov approached Wren with a small wooden box and a unit patch that had been stored away for years. "Your father always said shooting wasn't about hitting targets," Kozlov said, opening the box to reveal a shooting medal that had been officially rescinded. "It was about protecting what matters." As the unit watched, Wren walked to the memorial wall where Ezra Tannhauser's name was being re-engraved. She placed her hand on the fresh letters, feeling the cut of truth restored to history. "Your shot wasn't just a record," Kozlov told her, as the unit stood at attention behind them. "It was justice." The morning sun caught the tears Wren finally allowed herself, as she looked at a faded photograph of her father she carried every day of her journey. The man who had taught her that sometimes the hardest targets aren't measured in distance. Sometimes the most important shot is the one you refuse to take.